Hello everyone, welcome back to Assaulty Artillerist. We're going to look into another reaction movie. Now this one is called Battle Stations ... Tiger Attack HQ with extras. Now as far as I can tell, this one is from History Channel, or History Channel. One of those, it's one called one of those two, and it's dated back to 2001. I am not familiar with how great History Channel is at their things. I don't know how much they know about their homework. But it's a history channel, so they should get it right. They're not like BBs who are just broadcasting because they can rather than anything else. So let's see now how well this is going. Okay, we have an intro, yada yada yada. I think we'll just skip until I actually find something to comment on, because this is just intro. Alright, so we just saw 3 allied things in a row.
More than any other tank of World War II, the German Tiger tank, with its almost impenetrable armor.
By 1943 standards, impenetrable. Let's give it the credit, shall we? Be nice.
And highly accurate 88mm gun instilled fear in the hearts of Allied soldiers.
It killed 2 of my crew, and I was literally blown out of the top.
Outnumbered in nearly every battle, the highly trained and courageous Tiger crews were the elite of Germany's crack panzer troops.
It was a great thing to be in a Tiger, and of course we felt superior.
There's something off
Using
about that
archive
Tiger.
film and color reenactments, Battle Stations enters the world of one of the finest armored vehicles in the history of tank warfare.
I would never ever call it the finest tank. How do you define the finest tank? You can't call it the best either, because it sure as hell wasn't the best, but... Okay. I mean, like, if you take the triangle, which you always do, or to the basic observations about tank, then yes, it has nice mobility, it has acceptable armor, and it has an excellent gun, so... From that perspective, okay, it's perhaps one of the finest.
In 1916, the British Army was the first to introduce tanks on the battlefield.
And then you show... what they're called something else, the International tank. Good idea, because that's totally British and American built, that's not just British. You could just have shown a Mark 1, Mark 4, Mark 5 or a Whippet. Anything that was actually British in this case.
At the time, Germany showed little or no interest in the revolutionary new tank.
I honestly don't think they did not show any interest in it, they just didn't research it. I mean, like, they were busy chewing out U-boats, as far as I know at this point.
After their defeat in World War I, however, many German officers became convinced that when Germany rose again, the tank would play a major role.
You could also argue that the German offensive doctrine of the First World War was so different that tanks would not fit in with the role at all. Like, those massive waves of charging ahead, well, of course the Germans did that. But while British continued doing that, just with supporting of armor, that being the tank, Germans reserved themselves for Sturmgrenadier tactics, or whatever it was called. Assault tactics. So it was way too fast for a tank to keep up with anyways. Now, they did capture enemy tanks and use them against their enemies, which was referred to as Beutepanzers. That would be the Mark IV and the Mark V mostly. So technically they did use tanks, and they did also develop the A7V, but that doesn't really count, because the A7V was really a disaster in itself. Actually, you can't really argue, because the A7V was only really a development state, just judging by the fact they only made 20 of them, and I believe 2 of them were prototypes of some sort. One of was even a wooden mock-up, I believe. But that's besides the point. Let's carry on.
The Treaty of Versailles had banned all armament production in post-war Germany. Early development of German tanks during the 1920s and 30s had to be carried out in secret. But once Hitler and the Nazis came to power, all pretense of secrecy was thrown aside.
Not at once.
Germany had built its army into a mighty fighting machine that would conquer almost the entire continent of Europe. Large tank formations, known as panzer divisions, were to be its main striking force. General Heinz Guderian, one of the leading strategists in the German army, created Germany's panzer divisions. His ideas on the deployment and use of tanks in modern warfare earned him the title Father of the Panzers.
Hans Guderian studied armored warfare between World War I and World War II and was able to take rather nebulous ideas and condense them down into a formal doctrine. Armies operate on doctrine, and Guderian is the father of armored warfare doctrine.
Pretty much. I love how they actually get the things right.
The acknowledged leader in the principles of mechanization was British tank pioneer Major General John Fuller. Fuller was an eccentric genius whose ideas on tanks and mechanization earned him an international reputation, particularly in Germany.
My father's role model was Fuller. He also studied other people's ideas on tanks. But the British already had, at the beginning of the 1920s, a tank brigade, which we based our army's panzer divisions on. So it was the British who were his main role model.
Ironically,
Oof.
Major General Fuller's ideas were never adopted by either the British, French...
These are, by the way, I believe those are the American version of the FT Renault. Just judging by how the gunman looks and such. Either that or it's a train tank, one of them.
...or the Americans, who all believed in the supremacy of infantry and artillery rather than the tank.
Well, all of them made cavalry, and the cavalry was supposed to feature tanks. They were just not allowed to call them tanks, they were allowed to call them armored cars. But I guess that's besides the point in this case.
General Guderian, however, clearly appreciated the decisive role that armored divisions would play in future conflicts. He saw tanks as providing crucial mobility in an attack.
He developed the use of tanks as the main weapon in a division. Not like the French, who spread their tanks over several divisions, instead of concentrating them in one key point. With this concept of key point concentration in panzer divisions, we entered the war and had our success.
You know what, I have very few comments to give thus far. This is also only the first 5 minutes or something of the video. They get everything more or less right. Hans Guderian came up with the idea of rather than basing everything around the infantry in your army, as you more or less did earlier on, everything was just supposed to help the infantry, which we also do today because infantry is the only thing that can handle every single threat optimally, or is kind of the most utilized, army branch. He took in and said, what if we take the tank in the center of everything and then based everything around that? The infantry will have to mobilize as fast, the artillery will have to be able to give additional support fire, the Luftwaffe will have to come in and help the tanks out if there is an enemy ahead of them, stuff like that. Hans Guderian came up with that and perfected it, or if not perfected, at least laid the foundation for it, which will clear the way for the successes of Poland as well as in France. And it's amazing they get it right. I'm impressed. And then we see a Stug. Okay, Stug 3.
Hitler's panzer divisions were put to the test in 1939 when they spearheaded the German invasion of Poland. Enemy resistance collapsed within 6 weeks. Then the following year the Germans turned west to attack the British and French.
Well, some sources will indicate the Polish only surrendered right away because Russia was coming on the other side and they couldn't fight a two-front war even if the country was shrinking in. Also because they had a doctrine as fighting to the last bullet. Also they didn't implement minefield. Also they didn't have very much artillery support whenever they formed an attack. So Poland was also kind of fighting with a hand on its back, and well, while Germany really did have tanks like the Panzer II, Panzer III, Panzer IV in Poland, Poland had the limitation of only having tankettes with only 20 of them being equipped with 20mm autocannons, so they're really fighting a losing war. Or they were. Credits given to the Polish though, they did what they could with the resources they had.
French. The superior tactics of the panzers just sliced through the enemy lines with almost laughable ease.
They did not do it with ease. They had to punch through very hard. Some sources indicate Erwin Rommel just got lucky whenever he punched through the Magneto line and then continued forward into France. He's lucky he didn't get caught off or anything. That would result in the entire Panzer Division being lost, or Ghost Division as we'll call it later on.
Despite the fact that the Allies had more tanks.
Technically, they didn't have more tanks at that point. They had superior individual tanks, but based on an outdated doctrine. And I'm referring to the French tanks here. They are very suboptimal French tanks. I mean, like, they only have 2-man crew, single-man turrets. Even the cavalry tanks are not that fast. So yeah. Also, French tank doctrine was very well based on economics. Let's call it economics. So, for instance, you still have tanks which are able to deploy the FT-17 turret and the FT-17 gun just because that gun was cheap and the ammunition for the gun was cheap and the gun was very light and everything was based around that rather than actually basing it on something effective. The closest thing they get to an effective tank would be the Char B1 BIS or the S-35 Somov. Later on, the S-40 Somov, which they never entered production though, but that's besides the point. Let's carry on and see what they get right. Actually, this is not criticism of the episode because the episode thus far is great. This is just add-on information that I have at my disposal from studying tanks. I've done that for a couple of years now. I'm so glad thus far they actually get all the pictures right. They show Skoda tanks because they use Skoda tanks to punch through into France. They use Panzer IIs, they use... I don't see any Panzer Is though, but I believe they were, if not phased out, they were resorted just to training tanks at this point because now they actually had tanks available. I don't see any captured Polish tanks, but maybe they didn't use these yet. Maybe they just used them for policing Poland, which would actually be very important since Poland is a very rebellious country. Judging by the fact that they had maybe the biggest and most organized resistance movements of the time.
But in the autumn of 1941, the Germans were taken by complete surprise when the Russians deployed a new tank. Developed in great secrecy, the Russian T-34 outgunned and outperformed the German Panzers.
Really? I thought they already used the T-34 during the Winter War in Finland, but I might actually be wrong about that. Let me just check here for a moment. Correction. There was no T-34s in Finland. Not in the first Winter War at least. There would be later, but not in the first one. They were not ready by the time, but there were prototypes like the SMK and T-100 in Finland. Testing out, resulting in the KV-1 tank.
Of the three basic characteristics of any tank, firepower, armor, and mobility, the German designers favored firepower. So in response to Hitler's directive, Henschel decided upon a turret and an 88mm gun designed by Krupp, the German steel manufacturers. 2 months later, the new super tank was finally ready for combat trials. To match its performance, it was named the Tiger. At 56 tons, the Tiger was nearly 20 tons heavier than its nearest rival. Yet despite its size...
What did he say?
Named the Tiger.
Yes.
At 56 tons, the Tiger was nearly 20...
56? Does the Tiger really weigh 56 tons? Sources have confirmed it does weigh 56 tons. More or less, depending on how much equipment you stuff onto it. Alright. I thought it was only like... I don't know, I mean like 50 straight. But okay.
Tons heavier than its nearest rival. Yet despite...
50 tons, 20 tons heavier than its nearest rival. How much does the KV weigh at this time? Well, according to Wikipedia, just for the generally for the KV tanks in general, the KV-1 model 1941 weighs 45 tons, so they got that number wrong. Unless, of course, they're only thinking about German tanks, in which case it might be 20 tons heavier than the nearest Panzer IV, for instance. But it's not that much heavier than the Panzer V, the Panther. I might be wrong at that one, but I don't care. The fact of the matter is they got 20 tons wrong.
In late 1942, frontline units received their new wonder weapon, equipped with the most lethal tank gun in existence, the 88mm.
You might as well add 88mm L56, but okay, let's just say 88 because everyone knows what an 88 is, and we don't need to specify. Because even though if you call it PAK, you call it KVK, you call it Flak, or even if you bother to call it Stuk, it is still the same gun, just converted for different usage. Usage.
It would not take long to discover if the Tiger proved to be the battle-winning tank that Hitler badly wanted.
Crews for the Tiger were recruited exclusively from experienced...
Hold on.
They were
There's something wrong
in
here.
1942. Only the best crews were selected.
There's something up with that tank.
Produced in 1942.
That's...
Only the best crews were selected.
That tank is a T-55 rebuilt to look like a Tiger. If you look at the transmission.
They were the
Look at the transmission
42.
here. Look at the transmission. There are only single bogies or whatever it might be. Most likely on the, what is it called, torsion bar suspension. But if you look at the rear,
crews
you'll see the, whatever it's called, it's not called. I just said the name. You'll see that it actually pulls on the rear of the tank, not on the front.
Only the best crews were selected. They were the elite of the elite.
That's amazing. But it looks like it.
Crews for the Tiger.
Look at this. It might even just be a T-34, judging by the fact that it's putting all the tension here, all the transmission is here in the rear. Wow. I didn't even notice that. I knew something was off. It really didn't feel right. Then I noticed it's pulling in the back, so... Ha.
Tiger were recruited exclusively from experienced soldiers who had already served in other tank units during the war. Our training commenced with theory in the lecture hall, followed soon afterwards with practical on the actual machine.
So eine gute Maschine soll natürlich gepflegt werden. Gereinigt, gepflegt. Also, behandeln Sie ihn wie Ihren Augapfel.
Instructors explained the Tiger's advanced technology, using pamphlets about the care and maintenance each trooper was expected to carry out. The 5-man crew trained together, familiarizing themselves with the tank.
You know what? This episode is amazing! I almost have tears in my fucking eyes! Oh, there it is. I have a tear in my fucking eye now. They took an enemy tank, a T-34, probably a T-34 or a 55, I'm actually unable to tell. Then they reskinned it so it looks like a Tiger. They did it amazingly! And also, well, why am I this amazed at? Because I've seen another video, I believe it was by the BBC at some point, where they just took a T-34-85 and called it a Tiger. And then they took, whenever there was this monologue, this talking here where the soldiers are actually talking to each other and such in German, they took that, put on a saucy accent, and then made them speak English. What the fuck? But this one, it's perfection!
The 5-man crew trained together, familiarizing themselves with the tank until they understood every aspect of their new weapon. They particularly welcomed the superior protection the Tiger offered its crews. With nearly 4 inches of frontal and over 3 inches of side and rear armor, it was the world's most heavily armored tank.
Well, for the time. It wouldn't be very long till the churches came around and took that place of it, or that branch of it. And also, I am just going to pop out my head here. You see this logo here? Right here. That's the Leibstandard Adolf Hitler, I believe it's called. That's the first SS company. Interesting. I thought only Totenkopf, the third company, were really a panzer division. Apparently the first one also had tanks in their inventory. I'm still amazed. You know, these cross keys here. I'm pretty sure that's at least the Leibstandard. But I'm not sure. Actually, I'm sure, but I'm not sure what the fuck is wrong with me.
My first impression, I was disappointed. It was a dinosaur, not an elegant vehicle as I had imagined. I expected it to be like the T-34. However, when we got to know and learn how to apply its power, It became the superior tank on any battlefield to the end of the war.
What do you mean by superior exactly? I mean, like, you just have to look at the Tiger 2. It's probably better than the Tiger 1, but alright, I'll give you that credit. I mean, it's good. It's good. It's about as good as this goddamn series or this video about it. Let's go.
Hier, unser stärkster.
German tank designers were always searching for a bigger and better gun capable of dealing with enemy tanks.
The 88mm gun was superior to any other gun at that time. So was the technology for targeting the gun, with the turret-turning mechanism. The gunner stood with his foot on two rockers. If he pressed his foot forwards, the turret would turn to the right. If he pressed it backward, it would turn to the left.
The only thing I have to note here is the component looks kind of off. It looks like it has no vision slits or anything in it. It's not really the original size or anything. But that's such a detail in comparison to how much they actually get right in this episode, based on the materials they have available, that I'm going to let it just slide and not care about it.
In training, gunners and loaders were timed with a stopwatch, and only passed if they completed their tasks within the set number of seconds. Some of the top crews were even trained by Luftwaffe instructors, experts on the 88mm gun.
In case you don't know, that's because Luftwaffe had apparently the AA branch. That's apparently in under the Luftwaffe. And this is a flak gun, an anti-aircraft gun. But it's converted to a KVK modification, so it fits in a tank turret. In this case, in the Krupp turret, which is also the one manufacturing the gun. It's probably called KVK 36 or 37. Let me actually go look that up. According to Wikipedia, the Tiger uses the KVK 3688L56 gun, which is kind of odd though, because as far as I remember, there are 4 generations of the Flak 88 gun, which it is based on. There's the Flak 18, which is the original one, and don't be fooled by the fact it's called 18 because it's actually from 1928. But by calling 18, the Germans could say they had it in the First World War, and this gun, it was not infected or limited by the Versailles Treaty, I believe it was called. Yes. Then you have the model 1936, based on experience from the Spanish Civil War, with a 2-section barrel and all stuff like that. A lot of modifications to it. Then you also have the KVK 37, which was further improvement of the 36, and the 37 and 36 have interchangeable parts as far as I'm aware. What bothers me is, why did they use the KVK 36 if they couldn't take the KVK or the Flak 37 and turn it into a KVK 37? That would be a better gun. It probably doesn't matter because the guns are interchangeable.
The radio operator sat next to the driver and manned the forward machine gun located in a ball mounting on the offside of the front armor plate.
The machine guns were used primarily to fight off enemy infantry and anti-tank guns that were very close, keeping their crews' heads down.
Tiger tank drivers were selected with great care.
I cannot confirm this, but I don't think that the Tiger 1 had a steering wheel. It might have had, because that would make sense. You know, with the pumps and such, with hydraulic pump where you actually pump it over like modern cars work. But this is a tank. I don't know it. Let me actually have a look at it.
The thing will idle correctly, and away you go. Just make sure that at all times, unless you are actually putting a steering input, that you have pushed your steering levers all the way forward, especially when starting the engine. Apparently the manual says the tank doesn't like that.
So clearly, the Tiger did not have a steering wheel. It had levers, brake levers, like any other tank of the era, more or less. I'm just presuming at this point, because they are driving in a T-34 or a T-55, or perhaps even a T-54, converted to look like a Tiger, that one might have a steering wheel. I don't know this. I don't know how I would confirm this. So I'm just going here. They have a steering wheel, okay? They're doing a great fucking job. I don't care. Let's carry on.
The Tiger had 8 forward and 4 reverse gears, but its huge weight made steering difficult, so Henschel developed power steering, and for the first time a steering wheel instead of levers was used to maneuver a tank.
They had just taken all the research I just put into actually finding out if I'm correct or wrong here. They're taking it and said, fuck that, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're fucking wrong. We had a steering gear or steering wheel and a Tiger tank. The end. I don't have to see their source, of course, but I'm presuming they know their stuff because they know everything else they're doing. Clearly.
Because of the power steering, you could basically steer the Tiger with one finger, and the half-automatic gear shift was also much better than any other tank that we had.
Yeah, but the transmission kind of had a tendency to bite the crew in the butt.
The initial role for the heavy Tiger tank was to be the iron fist of the panzer divisions, punching a hole in the enemy lines.
That's the point of heavy tanks.
A panzer division, the cornerstone of German strategy, usually consisted of a panzer regiment, about 200 tanks, divided into 3 battalions. Each division had 2 panzer grenadier regiments, highly trained infantry, to support the tanks. In addition, there were artillery, engineers, anti-aircraft guns, and numerous support troops. The total number of men varied from 10 to 15,000 depending on the campaign. Tiger tanks were usually grouped into heavy companies and attached to divisions.
Each fighting company had 14 Tigers. And then in each company we had vehicles for maintenance troops, company vehicles for logistics, fuel provisions, ammunition supply, food, and so on.
Fuel is the lifeblood of tanks, and with the Tiger consuming 2.5 gallons per mile, the all-important fuel trucks were never far away.
Well, they kind of were, and that was the main problem with the Eastern Front. Logistics.
The Tiger is an engineering marvel. The vulnerability, though, is not the tank. It's everything that goes with it. It's the ammunition truck. It's the fuel browser that goes along with this. You attack that, the tank is useless.
Tiger units often included light and medium tanks, such as the Mark IIIs and IVs. These tanks were needed to perform numerous duties for which the Tiger was not suited, like scouting and escort duties. This left the Tiger to do what it did best, destroying the enemy at long range. The Tiger tank, with its highly trained crews, soon became a legend. Its sheer size and appearance, together with its large, deadly gun, was about to make the Tiger a battle winner.
You know what? We only seen, I believe, 1/3 of this movie, or 1/4 of the movie. I'm actually in doubt here, one of them. And I'm still amazed of how well they get the things right. I mean, like, I had an input here and there, and then shortly after, poof, they got a clip shooting my comments down, killing it in the drain, because they got that covered perfectly. This is a good episode.
You did get a little shiver when you met the Tiger tank. Not only because it was so powerful, but because we were young, and this tank was frightening. It was more powerful than the T-34.
Well, judging by there was never more than 20 operational Tigers on the Eastern Front at a time, on average. At least that's according to my sources. You would never really face a Tiger. Not every single tank out there is a Tiger. Every single tank out there may look like a Tiger from a long distance, and it's not only the Tiger that's able to kill the T-34, 34, but you never know. You won't be able to tell that it's exactly a Tiger whenever you meet a German tank. A Panzer IV from a long distance may even look like a tank easily. It also, the spaced armor added on it was used to camouflage it so it looked even more like a Tiger from a long distance. So I just think it's actually just meeting enemy tanks in general who are shooting at you and actually hit their targets. I think that's the frightening part. The fact that they are a Tiger is just additional information, which you would never be able to get from a T-34 because you are blindsided half the time. At least in the T-34 76. T-34 85 you might actually be able to indicate where it is the enemy and see him and such. But that's besides the point. Let's carry on. That's the first criticism I have about this entire episode, and we are what? Past 1/3 in the goddamn video.
Our 76mm guns could only fire at a distance of 500 meters. But a Tiger could shoot from a distance of 1 kilometer without missing. So this made it very hard for us.
Even if the T-34s got close enough, the Tiger's armor proved very effective.
In my first battle in a Tiger, we were exposed on the Russian steppe and took so many hits, but to no effect. I developed such a sense of security at the time and thought, with this vehicle, nothing can happen to me at all.
We felt quite safe in our tank, although it wasn't a life insurance. I was wounded 5 times despite the Tiger. But we could withstand an attack much better now. We had tanks that were hit 30 times by Russian guns and still in working order.
Amazing.
In one 6-hour engagement, a Tiger was hit 227 times.
That's confirmed.
Despite having its wheels, tracks and transmission damaged, it managed to crawl a further 40 miles across country.
Amazing, isn't it?
Tigers worked in conjunction with infantry and artillery, each element supporting the other. Panzer Grenadier machine gun teams were deployed on the flanks, up to 50 yards from the tank, in case of enemy infantry attacks.
I'm amazed. Woof!
Tiger commanders had excellent radio communications with their crews. Although Otter Carius sustained 5 serious wounds, he recovered and returned to the battlefront 9 months later.
I feel like at this point, I feel like there's some sort of German bias going on here because they are feeding me this intel here, and I have nothing to stop it with. It's like I'm being attacked by a fucking tiger. Like, I have no bad comments to give on this. They're doing it great. I feel like there's some weeaboo who must have made this, but it still had some sort of sense of realism because they're doing a great job. Yet again, we're only halfway through, so a lot of things can happen.
The SS Panzer divisions were also equipped with Tiger tanks. Although not strictly part of the army, the Waffen-SS were elite troops.
That's a nice detail which a lot of people often get wrong. The Waffen-SS was indeed an elite formation, but it was not really under the Wehrmacht's command. They were kind of under the Nazi policy's command, so that's also why they would normally not field German weapons. They would not run around with Sturmgewehrs unless they somehow either smuggled them or stole them, or someone underground supplied them. They would run around with Beutepanzers and captured equipment. Mostly.
Politically indoctrinated into the Nazi cause. Their reputation for bravery, as well as brutality, made the SS Panzer regiments amongst the most feared of all German troops. The destructive capability of the Tiger tank on the battlefield became legendary, and Allied soldiers soon coined the term Tigerphobia. General Montgomery actually banned British combat reports that recorded the prowess of Tiger tanks, on the grounds they undermined morale.
Well, again, not every single German tank out there was a Tiger. I don't know how many operational Tigers there were on average on the Western Front, but like I said, on the Eastern Front there were only 20 on average. So, most of these tanks were probably just Panzer IVs, which looked like, a Tiger from a safe distance. especially due to the spaced armor added onto the turrets and such.
Ironically, despite the perception by Allied troops that the SS Panzers fielded hundreds of Tigers, only 90 actually fought in Normandy.
Boom! There comes their counter-argument. They had the fact, they knew it just along that I was going to comment on it. But yeah, there you have it. 19 Tigers. That's all there was in the front. And then they also added the fact that they thought there were so many of them, hundreds. Yeah, those were not Tigers, those were all similar deadly machines.
But the damage they inflicted on the Allies confirmed the reputation of the Tiger. The most impressive exploit achieved by a Tiger unit in Normandy took place on the 13th of June 1944, 7 days after D-Day. That morning, several British tanks were advancing out of the French town of Villers-Bocage. The long, narrow road forced them to travel in single file with their headquarter vehicles in the center.
That's pretty much how it works, really. That's pretty much how convoys work. That's how apparently tank columns work. That's how infantry march on long stretches. They will go with the commander in the middle. If you're just going in one straight line. If you're going in two corners, then you have the commander and the second command next to him, really. Standard.
Unknown to the British, a group of 5 Tiger tanks, under the command of SS Lieutenant Michael Whitman, were hiding nearby. Whitman was a battle-hardened Tiger ace, who had destroyed 117 enemy tanks on the Russian front to win his Knight's Cross. Dispersing his other tanks to different strategic points, Whitman's Tiger entered the town. Catching the British by surprise, he destroyed 3 tanks before maneuvering his Tiger into a position to attack the British column from the rear.
And then through the smoke, suddenly emerged this huge tank. It moved its gun very slightly and fired. It was a crash, and the shell went through the front of the tank, between my legs. I could feel a tingling each side, so I know it must have gone between my legs, and landed up in the engine.
Poof!
And so a sheet of flame came over the tank, so I shouted bail out to the crew, because it wouldn't be very long before the ammunition exploded.
Within 2 minutes, Whitman's tank had left 13 British vehicles burning in the road. Menacingly, the Tiger now headed towards the tank commanded by Captain Pat Dias.
I fired at a Tiger at 100 yards, and the shot just bounced off, which is a bit disheartening.
What tank were you fielding exactly? That does not sound like the standard procedure either for a 6-pounder gun or a M3 from a Sherman or anything. It didn't say which tank he was actually operating. I'm just presuming here it was either that. It was either 6-pounder or Churchill, or no, not Churchill, Cromwell or anything like that. Or I'm presuming it was some sort of Lend-Lease Sherman. So, yet again, you got hit on a bad angle. I don't know.
Dias managed to reverse his tank into a garden out of sight as Whitman passed by. He then decided to ambush Whitman from behind, but before he could fire, the Tiger had turned.
We met head-on, which was not good news. And I fired at him twice, and as before they bounced off. He then fired at me once, which did not bounce off. It killed 2 of my crew, and I was literally blown out of the top.
Eight more SS Tigers reinforced Whitman, and the battle raged. Finally, his Tiger was knocked out, but he escaped, leaving Villers-Bocage a scene of death and destruction. Despite losing 4 Tigers, Whitman had destroyed 47 Allied vehicles.
I see Cromwells everywhere, so I'm presuming he was in a Cromwell of some sort. I don't know which model though, but that doesn't really matter either. The point of the matter is, he bounced off. The Tiger didn't.
And inflicted 257 casualties. Pat Dias's heroic attempt to stop Whitman's Tiger had left him wounded and nearly blind. Luckily, the doctor who treated him at the first aid station was an eye specialist.
He put a great big magnet over my eyes and brrr, brrr, and out jumped all the little bits of steel. And he said, if those had stayed in for 24 hours, you would have been blind for life.
The encounter at Villers-Bocage had demonstrated, despite overwhelming odds, how lethal a well-commanded Tiger could be in close-quarter combat.
Wittmann himself, I could not but admire him. He was tough, he was bold, and ruthless. A fine example of a German tank man.
8 weeks after Villers-Bocage, Michael Wittmann was killed when his Tiger was ambushed by a British tank. Although the initial D-Day landings had been a success, fanatical German resistance had stopped the Allied advance. The Tiger was proving itself very effective in defense. Its long-range gun and thick armor proved unforgiving.
The Tiger was best avoided, really. You couldn't really do anything against them. It felt quite powerless. It's like a nightmare, you know, where things get a little bit nasty and a little bit nastier and a little bit nastier, and then, my God, it is a Tiger. And call on the radio, say there's a Tiger, and give a map reference, and then the RAF would come very quickly in their Typhoons and rocket it.
Finally, to bring in fighter bombers, by the way. That's about time to do that because, well, the most effective means against a tank might actually be a fighter bomber. The problem is, a fighter bomber does not necessarily destroy a tank upon engagement. It may be just making minor damage to it, it may not even hit it at all. It may terminate it, it may blow it up. But chances are, against a Tiger at least, it does close to nothing. Not due to the armor, but due to the fact that it's hard to kill and the commanders know how to stay out of sight. They have been fighting against IL-2s for years, or at least for a couple of years, by the time they moved to the, well, there must be the Western Front. Let's carry on here. What impresses me though is, thus far they have not said a single thing about Tigers operating in the deserts, where they were also going toe-to-toe with I believe it was Montgomery, and the Desert Rats were facing off. But nothing really happens. They don't talk about it. They don't specialize in it. They don't even tell that it's going on. They don't tell about the Tiger 131, which you can now see at the Bovington Museum. Please sponsor me. But that's besides the point, I suppose. Alright. This is still a great episode and really recommend it. It's very educational. Let's carry on.
On July the 18th, 1944, Operation Goodwood was launched as the first phase of the Allied breakout in Normandy. The plan was to blast a path with heavy bombers to allow 3 Allied armored divisions to push forward. 1,500 bombers of the Royal Air Force staged the biggest air raid of the war against German tank positions. Lieutenant Richard von Rosen and his Tiger crew were waiting in well-entrenched positions when they heard the RAF Pathfinder planes overhead.
They
flew over us and continued dropping these flares. Then I knew it was going to get ugly. Although what was going to happen at that stage I couldn't even imagine. I saw the tank next to me, meters away, was burning severely. It had been sliced open like a sardine can, hit right through. Our courage was somewhat diminished. We'd never seen anything like it. You have to imagine what we experienced in our tank during these 2.5 hours of carpet bombing. It was hell.
By late August, all German resistance in Normandy collapsed. The German 7th Army lost 250,000 men and thousands of tons of material. Despite its success, the landscape of Normandy had not allowed the Tiger tanks to be used to their full potential.
The Tiger probably made a difference on the Eastern Front, where the Germans faced a target-rich environment, and it's good tank country. When you get it into an area where it's closed, like a city or a lot of places in Western Europe, where the terrain is closed down and you can't see 2,000 meters, it loses a lot of effectiveness in that it doesn't have the fields of fire that it would have in Russia.
You know, that there has absolutely nothing to do with what we just told here. We were told that these tanks were a carpet bomb to hell and back. We were not told anything about their failing to engagement. They have not told about the Sherman Firefly or, you know, tank hunting and killing squads. We haven't met Fury yet. We haven't done anything here. We're just been shown that they were a carpet bomb to oblivion. Okay? We haven't been told anything about the environment or anything being a threat to them. Which of course is truly a factor. They were a very closed environment in France in comparison to the Eastern Front. Yes, that would play a role, but they haven't spoken about this in this episode. And that's kind of criticism I will hope to take for granted. That's kind of the only thing I've found thus far. Yet again, we're only 2/3 through the movie, so a lot of things could go wrong yet. Let's continue, shall we?
Despite his empire collapsing around him, Adolf Hitler still pursued his dream of a bigger and better tank. Incredibly, at this late stage in the war, the Third Reich found the resources to produce the even more powerful King Tiger.
Königstiger, but okay. Let's just go with King Tiger. Well, that's kind of what it means. You could also call it the Royal Tiger, the Tiger B, the Tiger II, whatever you want to call it. And well, the Tiger II came out of necessity because the Tiger I was not longer safe due to Fireflies being out there. 70-pounder guns could punch right through it. And well, the Soviets were starting to come up with IS-2 tanks, which was really a bugger, at least for the Tiger I. So Tiger II came out of necessity, not because they just felt like it.
Hitler would use this super tank in a daring last-minute gamble to turn the tide of the war. By late 1944, the German armies were in retreat on all fronts. But Hitler believed that the new King Tiger tank would give his panzer divisions the winning edge on the battlefield. 5 years of war had seen his panzers sustain enormous losses in material, which even the efficient German armaments industry found difficult to replace.
Well, what do you mean by even? I mean, like, they were still producing it. They were not really streamlining production. They wouldn't do that until the E-Series, which never really became a real thing. By the way, the E-Series, that's kind of assembling all kind of patents and license and whatsoever, spreading out to as many manufacturers as possible, and then produce a standard Panzer program all the way through. For instance, the Panzer III, I believe it was, Krupp did not have a license to produce the Panzer III, but they did to have produced the Panzer IV, so ergo, Krupp was limited to producing Panzer IVs, and from the Panzer IV developed the Stuke IV, because they did not have the license to produce the Stuke III. This might not matter as much, but still, that's kind of the problems you have in Germany. Each special compartment and part comes from each special manufacturer, while in America, everything was kind of put together, assembled, shipped over, easily. Which is kind of the exact same, but at least have the industrial capacity to perform such. They also had more streamlining than the Germans could ever wish for. The same with whatever it was called over in the Soviet Union. All the CIS factories were kind of just smashed together, make these compartments, make these tanks, hope you survive tomorrow. If you haven't produced those tanks by tomorrow, Stalin will come down and butcher your family. So, you won't really say it was amazing. I mean, they didn't even produce that many tanks. Like I've said in other videos, or at least in my first video here, they only produced, 21,000 tanks That is pure tanks which have not been converted to assault guns, tank hunters, or other things. Assault guns, for that matter. Mobile artillery. But if you include everything, they produced 49,700 in total. That is according to Wikipedia. It could be incorrect whatsoever. Let's go on.
Once the United States and the Soviet Union had entered the war, German tank production could not compete. The Americans alone produced 4 times as many tanks as Germany. The Soviet Union produced more than 40,000 T-34s during the course of the war.
They produced 84,400 exactly. This number is known just because they stamped exactly the model number, the date, and the year on the front of the armor. It's right here on the front where there would be a registration number if you bought these in private. They know exactly how many they produced, or at least it should be able to. They should be able to assess how many they produced.
But Hitler was obsessed with super heavy tanks. He believed that superior weapons were the key to victory. They were, however, expensive. A Tiger tank took 300,000 man-hours to build, at a cost of 800,000 Reichsmarks, the same as 3 fighter planes.
The funny thing here is, some sources will indicate it only cost 300,000 Reichsmark, but yet again that's for the late model Tiger one, where they have fixed all the problems with it and such. Actually they didn't, they never fixed the problems fully, but yeah, they have streamlined the production and such. Even the Tiger NO6, I believe, the tank they wanted to send to Japan, cost 600,000. That was including at least one functioning Tiger, split up in atoms and parts, blueprints, license, and shipment of the entire thing. Of course, that Tiger never made it to Japan, and it wouldn't really have made any sort of difference over there. But again, 600,000 Reichsmarks for the entire package. And then 300,000 Reichsmarks for just one Tiger, a late production Tiger. It doesn't matter at this point, this is still a great episode.
To solve their manpower problems, the Nazis staffed their factories with enforced labor. This actually hampered German mass production, as it took far longer to build the sophisticated Tiger tank, with many needless man-hours being wasted. Whereas the American Sherman and the Russian T-34 tanks were far more suited to mass production by relatively unskilled workers. The new King Tiger was introduced onto the battlefield in late 1944. At 70 tons, it would be the largest tank in service during World War II.
Was it really 70 tons? It very clearly here says 70 tons and well a 70 horsepower engine to pull those 70 tons. That's a ratio of barely 10 pH per ton, so it's kind of underpowered. The rule of thumb is that everything under 10 pH per ton, that's underpowered. 20 pH per ton, that's good. Over that, that's cavalry levels. That's kind of BT-7 levels of mobility.
Its long-barreled gun could deal with any tank with apparent ease.
Not exactly. Some sources suggest the Tiger II and the 88L71 had problems dealing with the IS-2 tank at a long distance. But just to confirm this, I'm going to go to some unofficial tank site and take it into account. So this is a totally legit test here we have. We have an IS-2 able to rotate every single degree it wants to for some reason. Yes. And then we have the shells and the gun from a Tiger II tank. So if we look from the side, no problem at all. Even on the turret, no problem at all. It can go through, it chew right through. If you get a side shot. However, what if you get a rear shot though? And still pretty good actually. Huh, never mind. What if you hit the log? No problem. Alright, wooden armor is not a thing. What if we hit the front then? Oh. Amazing. Alright, what if I set the distance to beyond 500 kilometers or 500 meters? The game only allows me to go out to 300 meters for some reason. You're way too close actually in wargaming to do real tank combat, but sure. We have a few bounces here and there, some bad angles. You actually don't have that much surface to hit on. If you hit beyond that, it'll just bounce right off. And even worse on the battlefield conditions, really. But yeah, as long as you shoot mid on the goddamn thing, you're safe. As long as you shoot from the side, there is no chance in hell it's going to bounce. So, alright then. So if we take it against the Tiger 1 and a Tiger 1 gun, you see that the result is kind of not really 100% everywhere, but the chance is still pretty damn high though. Huh. Still though, if you take this gun, I believe it's the D25 or something that's in the IS-2, and put that up against the Tiger, it'll cut right through it as butter. So though, that's actually amazing. Huh. It doesn't even have that much armor now that I look at it. Huh. That's interesting. Anyways, back to the video.
Panzer Commander Richard von Rosen is seen here inspecting his battle group of King Tigers.
The King Tiger had a similar shape to the T-34. It had sloping armor, not the square shape of the Tiger 1. In the West, the enemy tanks didn't give us a headache, neither the Sherman or the bigger version, the Firefly, with its bigger gun. None of this was a problem for us.
The Ardennes counteroffensive, known as the Battle of the Bulge, began on the 16th of December 1944. It is the one battle of the war most closely linked with the King Tiger tank. Hitler ordered 10 Panzer and 14 infantry divisions to break through the Ardennes forest in Belgium, seize the port of Antwerp, and sever the Allied supply line to their northern armies. One King Tiger battalion was placed in an SS battle group spearheading the advance. Using the poor weather to their advantage, the German troops completely surprised the Americans, throwing them back in disarray within the first few days. A German breakthrough looked imminent. Although the Germans only deployed about 150 King Tigers, their reputation completely outweighed the impact of their numbers.
Initially, during the Battle of the Bulge, when the King Tiger was used against American troops, it panicked them. They'd never seen anything that big. So they were caught completely by surprise. Here they are, supposed to be in a quiet front. The next thing you know, they have this monstrous, huge King Tiger rolling down on top of them. And it shocked them. It was hard to recover from this initial panic.
But the Germans soon discovered they had made a tactical blunder in using King Tigers, despite its lethal killing power, to spearhead the offensive. Because of its size, the King Tiger was not suited to rapid maneuvering through the narrow roads of the hilly and heavily wooded terrain of the Ardennes.
So in other words, they make the exact same mistake as they made with Normandy, because whenever you actually have a country with habited forest and such, you have a problem. Those don't exist in the Soviet Union, they have died off long ago. Either that or it's winter constantly. So don't make a Tiger tank fight on this type of environment. Make it fight on large urban areas. Got it.
They're operating in mud and slush, snow. And because it was so huge, the German engineers would have to build special bridges for it and raft these things across. The attack bogged down.
When the SS tank crews ran out of fuel and ammunition, they were forced to fight their way out on foot, after first destroying their own King Tigers rather than see them captured.
Why are King Tigers even needed on the Western Front? I'm just asking here. Because the Americans are only able to supply medium tanks, and the British aren't really able to get the churches overboard, and even if they do, the church is kind of just a big old target. It doesn't really do much. It has not a lot of punching power to it. Why is there a need for huge tanks by the Wehrmacht in the Western Front? It would be better just to imply huge guns there. The Panzer IV would be perfectly adequate for this, or the Panzer would be perfectly adequate for this. You don't need anything bigger there, because they don't have that many big scary things there. They just have a lot of small things. On the other hand, the Russians are starting to imply IS-2 tanks. They are developing the IS-3 tank. They have KVs probably still in production somewhere, and they are rolling in with more IS-T-34s than you can actually destroy. Why would you need to take your big huge tank and send it to the Western Front, where everything is nice and dandy, when on the Eastern Front everything is a nightmare and they need help urgently? Yet again, I wasn't there. I'm just taking the hindsight here and wondering. There's probably someone out there who knows a much better answer than I do, but still, I don't know.
The desperate nature of the fighting experienced in the Ardennes counteroffensive became evident in one incident when 77 unarmed American prisoners were brutally massacred by the SS near Malmedy. After the war, 80 former SS soldiers were prosecuted for murder.
Well, that's kind of the standard, you know. You don't always have the time to take prisoners of war, and you can't just let them go because they'll tell where you are and what you're doing. That's just how war is. And no, we cannot all just get along. Out of the last 3,000 years of history, the world has not been at peace for more than 3 years at a time. Someone is always going to have something against someone. War is our nature, it's our culture, and that's how it works. Stop talking about peace.
The Germans sought to maintain the initiative by redeploying their remaining King Tigers to the town of Bastogne, which had been surrounded earlier in the offensive. But here, determined American resistance prevented Bastogne from falling. A hard battle was fought for this strategic position, but even the King Tigers could not turn the tide. As the weather improved, Allied air superiority decimated the German armor, including the precious King Tigers. With the defeat of Hitler's Ardennes Gamble, the last great Tiger action in the West had been fought and lost. Germany's defeat was now just weeks away. The few Tigers remaining in Hitler's diminishing arsenal were used mainly on the Eastern Front.
The war was lost. Everybody knew that. We only wanted to keep the Russians as far away as possible from the German border. That was our motivation.
During the final 2 years of the war, the Panzer troops had fought with distinction through the great battles on both East and West fronts. Their skill and discipline in defense, often against overwhelming odds, had pushed the Allies to the limit.
People tend to underestimate how good the Germans were, and they also thereby underestimate how good we were.
And now they're kindly more overestimating how good the Germans were and underestimating how good the Allies were. That's an interesting twist of events we have taken over these last 18 years.
Throughout its operational life, the Tiger tank was rushed to every crisis, and its crews fought on every front. Its performance in battle became legendary.
I wouldn't have wanted to go into battle in any other tank but the Tiger, because it was superior in every aspect to every other tank we had.
That's a good pointer twist. I was about to correct him, but then he said, than any other tank we have. He wasn't referring to all the other tanks out there. Good point twist to note.
The Tiger was, for me, the best tank that existed. It had its flaws, which you got to know, but you could live with that. Life in a Tiger crew, commanding a Tiger company, was, for me, the highlight of my time as a soldier.
The Germans were unable to produce such an advanced weapon in the numbers needed to save the Third Reich. Yet even with the defeat of Nazi Germany, the reputation of the Tiger endures.
During World War II, the Tiger tank is absolutely superior to the American Infantry Sherman or the Russian T-34.
You're comparing a heavy tank to a medium tank. Don't do that. I thought you were a professional.
But in the end, they only made 1,300 of them. And overall, that's a drop in the bucket. But, having said that, the tank's going to go down in military history as one of the great tanks of all time.
One of them. Thank you. So, Battle Stations Tiger Attack. You know, this was a great episode. I would say, like, probably, I don't know, we're probably talking 7 out of 10. The major flaws they did here was always corrected right afterwards. When I had given a comment on it, they just took a hammer, took my hand, smacked it down over it and said, no, because it was like this, this and that. Which is, first of all, excellent. Now, they did not give a single thought to the African Corps and how it went on down there in the deserts, where Tank 131, for instance, were captured a long time ago. That's also one of the first places where tanks or Tigers were used, as far as I know. But that's besides the point then, I suppose. They did not give any sort of credit to anti-tank obstacles or anti-tank means by the infantry, such as, I believe someone even killed a tank with a bazooka. No one mentioned that, for instance. No one mentioned how the 70-pounder gun by itself was dangerous. There was only one tiny mentioning of the Firefly, even though the Firefly wasn't that much of a game changer, perhaps. There was no mentioning how M4 Shermans actually killed this one. There was no mentioning of Fury. There was nothing, really. They just sat there. Eastern Front, Eastern Front, Eastern Front, Eastern Front, Western Front. Bombed. They gave all the credit here to the Royal Air Force. Which, of course, well, that's fine, cause that's the fact of the matter. Carpet bombing is the major offensive power in this thing, and Air Force divided by tanks equals winning Air Force, so yeah, that's clear mathematics here. I will see the last bit here, but I don't think there is anything more to it. Well, there's actually more to it. I thought we were done. Alright. But yeah, that's it. There's been the Salty Artillerist here, looking through tank battles, Tiger Attack. If you like so much more, please do subscribe to the channel, leave a like and or share it with your friends. Until next time in something hopefully completely else. This has been a pleasant episode, and bye bye, I'll see you guys around up there.